In the sky, Lin Dong stood suspended, a contemplative look on his face. The sudden appearance of the space ancestral talisman had clearly caught him off guard. The collusion between the Yuan Sect and the alien demons is beyond doubt now, he muttered. But if that's the case, how did the Yuan Sect's 3 giants manage to control the space ancestral talisman? Generally speaking, ancestral talismans exert a powerful restraint on alien demons. Anything containing demonic aura would be strongly repelled by the talismans, let alone able to wield them. However, Lin Dong had distinctly sensed that previous fluctuation. Without question, it was the power of the ancestral talisman. Only the space ancestral talisman among the 8 great ancestral talismans could achieve the seamless ability of that silver hand to pierce through space. Otherwise, even a peak reincarnation stage expert would struggle to leave no trace while crossing dimensions. Huan, too, frowned slightly and shook her head slowly. She clearly had no idea what method the Yuan Sect had used to control the space ancestral talisman. Whatever method they've used doesn't matter, Lin Dong said with a faint smile, his dark eyes glinting coldly. A celestial treasure like the ancestral talisman cannot fall into their hands. Once those 3 old dogs are dealt with, we'll seize the space ancestral talisman. Huan nodded. Her ice-blue eyes glanced off into the distance as she absent-mindedly twirled a strand of icy blue hair by her ear, her beautiful yet cold face betraying a hint of an indescribable expression. In her line of sight was another woman of incomparable beauty, as if she was born of the world's very essence. Lin Dong also noticed her gaze, and for a moment, the face that hadn't flinched before the Yuan Sect's giants now showed a hint of discomfort. The current relationship between the 3 of them was undeniably awkward. Lin Dong and Ling Qingzhu shared an intimate history. Many years ago, one of the main reasons he had left the small Great Yin dynasty was to pursue this woman, who had briefly appeared in his life like a fleeting blossom. Ling Qingzhu was proud, and Lin Dong was stubborn. He had once needed to look up to her. Now, he was determined to surpass her. Toward Ling Qingzhu, Lin Dong couldn't deny he felt a deep desire to conquer her. This desire had taken root that day on the isolated peak, accompanied by a man's possessive streak. He couldn't imagine his own heart remaining calm if he ever saw Ling Qingzhu in another man's embrace. Their reckless moments of the past had left an indelible mark on both of them, something neither could erase or deny. And Huan had come into his life later. With all the sacrifices she had made and the years she had waited for him, even Lin Dong, with his steely heart, couldn't ignore her. Scenes from Demon City still stirred a bittersweet ache within him. Once a playful, spirited girl, she had become a cold beauty, in part because of him. The transition in her character hinted at untold sorrow and hardship that even Huan herself might not fully comprehend. There was no question of the brilliance of these 2 women. One was 9 Heavens Taiching Palace's most outstanding disciple in generations. The other now bore the formidable title of Ice Lord and a reincarnation powerhouse. Each had a proud heart, and it was inconceivable that either would submit to the other. This was precisely what caused Lin Dong so much frustration. Kill. Just as Lin Dong was momentarily distracted by his inner turmoil, a thunderous sound of battle erupted below. The disciples of 9 Heavens Taiching Palace were charging at the fleeing Yuan Sect disciples. Having lost many elders, the Yuan Sect disciples' morale was utterly shattered. Faced with the relentless pursuit, their pitiful screams echoed across the battlefield. In times like these, mercy was not a consideration. Yuan Sect had waged war, and this was the price they had to pay. Besides, these disciples had been tainted by demonic aura. Left unchecked, they would become mindless killing machines. The brutal slaughter lasted a long time, and the land was littered with the corpses of Yuan Sect disciples. A few lucky survivors scrambled away in defeat, their previous ferocity nowhere to be seen. Big Brother Lin Dong. Su Ro waved excitedly from a distance, her little face flushed with excitement. Lin Dong glanced over and, after a moment, stepped toward her. Big Brother Lin Dong, you're not injured, right? Su Ro looked at Lin Dong, who had landed in front of her, quickly scanning him up and down before smiling. At this moment, Countless disciples of the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace were also nearby, their eyes curiously fixed on Lin Dong, filled with gratitude. If it hadn't been for Lin Dong and the others stepping in to help today, the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace might have become a thing of history in the Eastern Mystery region. Lin Dong smiled and shook his head, then turned his gaze to the woman in the white gown standing behind Su Ro, Ling Qingzhu, whose demeanor was as cold and ethereal as an immortal. Upon sensing his gaze, she slightly turned her head, but her eyes instead met the figure of Huan standing behind Lin Dong. The two women's gazes interlocked, and for a brief moment, it felt like the air itself had frozen. Both women carried an air of coldness, though Huan's chilling presence was more pronounced due to her unique physique, while Ling Qingzhu's frosty aura emanated from her innate grace. No matter where they were, both women naturally drew the attention of everyone around them. But now, standing together, their respective radiances and coldness seemed to clash, creating an oddly intense atmosphere. It was as if the entire area had fallen under the peculiar aura between the two women. The disciples of the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace fell silent, their gazes flitting between the two women and Lin Dong, some raising their brows slightly. In the end, they cast looks of envy and sympathy toward Lin Dong. Little Mink, Elder Zhu, and the others also swept over. Seeing the strange atmosphere, they couldn't help but chuckle and looked at Lin Dong with teasing expressions. Ahem. The strange tension lingered, and with neither Huan nor Ling Qingzhu speaking, Lin Dong finally coughed lightly to break the silence. He then looked at the ruined Nine Heavens Taiching Palace, paused for a moment, and said, "What happened to your palace master?" "Master passed away." Ling Qingzhu's eyes, like autumn waters, briefly clouded with sorrow. "The elders are all severely injured, and now, the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace is gravely weakened." Lin Dong sighed quietly. It was an inevitable situation. Compared to Yuan Sect, the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace was indeed in no position to put up much resistance. If they had arrived any later, the losses might have been even worse. This time, on behalf of all the disciples of the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace, I thank you. Also, my thanks to the friends of Dao Sect and the seniors from the foreign realms, Ling Qingzhu said softly. Heh, it's nothing, Elder Zhu chuckled, then shook his head. Never mind, you young ones should talk. I can't quite handle this atmosphere. With that, he turned and walked away. Little Mink and the others smiled and followed suit, and the disciples of the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace gradually scattered. Yet, their curious gazes continued to sweep back toward Lin Dong, lingering. Seeing the crowd disperse, Huan glanced at Lin Dong with her icy blue eyes. She then turned to Ling Qingzhu and gave a slight smile before extending her delicate hand. Dao Sect's Huan. I believe we've met before. Ling Qingzhu. Miss Huan's name is well known throughout the Eastern Mystery region by now. Ling Qingzhu responded with a rare, soft smile on her exquisite face. She reached out to shake Huan's hand. Both women were proud and unwilling to show the slightest weakness in front of each other. Then you two talk, Huan said, her voice softening as her gaze turned to Lin Dong. Once we're done here, we'll head back to Dao Sect. I'll wait for you. After saying that, she turned and walked away without hesitation. Miss Huan is very kind to you, Ling Qingzhu remarked as she watched Huan leave, her voice quiet for a moment before adding, Have you been to the Great Yin Dynasty? My mother said she's met you. Lin Dong smiled and looked at Ling Qingzhu. My mother said whenever you feel like coming back, just bring them along. Ling Qingzhu nodded calmly, though a faint blush tinged her fair cheeks. I happened to have business in the Great Yin Dynasty and took the opportunity to visit your parents. She spoke with apparent tranquility, yet there was a slight hint of awkwardness in her normally impassive eyes. The excuse sounded hard to believe. Lin Dong smiled and nodded. My mother said whenever you all feel like returning, just bring them back. Ling Qingzhu shot him a playful glance. Her allure made him feel a moment of weakness, and when she raised her delicate eyebrows, she seemed to sense something in his words. We. Lin Dong's head immediately started to hurt. Ling Qingzhu pouted slightly and turned her head. 3 years, and you've changed a lot. Lin Dong laughed softly, lifting his gaze to the setting sun. Because I wanted to come back. Ling Qingzhu fell silent. In those few words, she realized just how much hardship the young man before her had endured over the past 3 years. While others only saw the brilliance of his return, they could never know how many times he had teetered on the edge of life and death to gain the power he now wielded. Actually, 3 years ago, you were already quite impressive. Ling Qingzhu spoke softly, her mind drifting back to a scene from 3 years ago. A slender figure, blood-soaked, wielding a long spear, stood fearlessly before the 3 giants of the Yuan Sect. His indomitable spirit moved countless onlookers, herself included. Lin Dong smiled, stretched slowly, and let out a deep breath. Now that I'm back, it's time to settle everything once and for all. How do you plan to do that? Ling Qingzhu sensed a sudden, chilling intensity in his words. Lin Dong looked up, his gaze fixed on the blood-red setting sun, his voice calm yet resolute. 3 days from now, we'll face the Yuan Sect in a battle to the death. The Yuan Sect's plan to annihilate the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace had been thwarted by Lin Dong and his allies. Though the Yuan Sect suffered a crushing defeat, the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace lay in ruins. Its palace master was gravely injured and had passed away. The remaining elders were also critically wounded. Now, the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace was at its weakest. Bring the disciples of the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace with us to the Dao Sect. Staying here is too dangerous. If the Yuan Sect attacks again, there will be heavy casualties among your disciples. Aware of the palace's vulnerability, Lin Dong suggested this to Ling Qingzhu. Ling Qingzhu hesitated slightly. Moving to the Dao Sect would feel somewhat like seeking refuge, and though she knew Lin Dong's advice was sound, she couldn't entirely dispel a small sense of reluctance. You're now the palace master of the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace. Lin Dong looked at her intently. Ling Qingzhu's hands clenched briefly before she nodded slightly. She knew she had to prioritize the safety of her disciples, even if it meant enduring a bit of discomfort. You should make the arrangements, Lin Dong said, casting a thoughtful glance at the ruins. In just a few short days, a once prestigious sect in the Eastern Mystery region had nearly been wiped out. He could imagine how painful this must have been for Ling Qingzhu. With that, he walked away and sat on a hill, watching as she relayed the orders to her disciples, their spirits clearly dampened by the situation. You're taking them to our Dao Sect? Asked a voice beside him, filled with a chilly aura. Huan had joined him, sitting gracefully and resting her cheek on her hand as she looked over at the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace disciples clearing up the wreckage. Yes, Lin Dong nodded with a smile. You don't mind, do you? I'm not that petty. Huan shot him a look, then gazed at the ruins, murmuring, I actually understand her. Before you came back, I was carrying the entire Dao Sect on my shoulders. Yuan Sect powerhouses kept emerging, and the 3 giants never even showed their hands. I worried that one day, if I failed, our Dao Sect would end up like this. For 3 years, I missed you. Yet I had to pour all my energy into protecting the Dao Sect. Huan wrapped her long, slender legs close to her body, resting her delicate chin on her knees. Her cold, beautiful face softened with a rare vulnerability that tugged at his heart. I feared that I wouldn't live to see your return, or that by the time you did, the Dao Sect would be destroyed, and I would be someone entirely different. Lin Dong looked at the girl beside him, realizing that while his journey had been hard, her path hadn't been any easier. 3 years ago, she was a lively, carefree princess of the Dao Sect, beloved by all, without a worry in the world. But since then, the lives of countless Dao Sect disciples had rested on her young shoulders, a burden unimaginable. You've worked so hard, but now I'm here. Let me carry these burdens. I'm pretty resilient, you know, he said gently, reaching out to stroke her hair. Her cool, silky locks felt soothing to the touch. All right. A light blush crept over Huan's face at his gesture. Though now a figure in the Dao Sect as revered as Lin Dong himself, she responded with uncharacteristic obedience, her voice soft enough that only she could hear. Don't worry. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. From a distance, Ling Qingzhu, overseeing the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace disciples as they prepared to depart, glanced over at the two of them on the hill. TSK, Senior Sister Qingzhu, it seems you've met quite a formidable opponent this time, came a soft voice nearby. Su Ro had quietly sidled over, her gaze fixed on the mountaintop, a mischievous smile on her face. Ling Qingzhu cast her a cool glance and replied, Huan was willing to step forward for him in Demon City, even risking her life to forcing Xuanzi to reveal himself and intervene. Such a bold and passionate spirit. I could never match that. Not at all. You two just have different ways of showing your feelings, Su Ro retorted with a playful hum. I know you like Brother Lindong. Otherwise, given your personality, there's no way you'd make an annual trip to the great Yan dynasty. Senior Sister Qingzhu, your heart might seem encased in ice, but behind that ice, there's definitely a fierce warmth. And perhaps that warmth is something only Brother Lindong will ever get to experience. Faced with Su Ro's teasing, even someone as composed as Ling Qingzhu couldn't help the faint blush that swept across her stunning features. Feigning irritation, she retorted, You little troublemaker. Who taught you these annoying tricks? Go help with the preparations, then withdraw. Yes, ma'am. Su Ro responded with a laugh, waving her hand. But don't let this chance slip by, Senior Sister Qingzhu. There's no remedy for regret in this world. Ling Qingzhu watched Su Ro run off with a smile. Her lips pressed together as her once calm heart was stirred once again, rippling with intensifying emotions. After half a day spent clearing the aftermath, Lindong and his group cast one last glance over this once majestic place, now reduced to ruins. With a sigh, Lindong waved his hand, leading his people away. Upon returning to the Dao sect, a significant stir arose as disciples of the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace, looking defeated and despondent, were met by the Dao sect members. Many sighed inwardly, knowing this war had swept across the entire Eastern Mystery region. If not for Huan's brave sacrifice and Lindong's timely return, Dao sect might have met an even worse fate than the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace. In the Dao sect's main hall, Xuanzi listened to the account of what had befallen the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace. He let out a deep sigh, his face shadowed with regret. Now in the Eastern Mystery region, only the Yuan Sect and our Dao sect remain standing. I doubt Yuan Sect will sit by while we continue to hold our ground, Xuanzi remarked. Sect Master, you needn't worry too much, Lindong replied, shaking his head. Although the Nine Heavens Taiching Palace suffered heavy losses, the Yuan Sect also paid a significant price. Many of their elders were wiped out. Even with the alien demons aiding them in secret, such losses can't be taken lightly. Do you mean? Xuanzi's eyes sharpened. An offensive. We should destroy Yuan Sect and end the chaos in the Eastern Mystery region. Lindong's eyes flashed with fierce resolve, his voice calm but resolute. The Dao sect elders, including Xuanzi, were taken aback. With Yuan Sect's current strength, most were inclined to defend rather than attack. Yet Lindong was even more audacious, proposing an outright assault on Yuan Sect. Father, though Yuan Sect is formidable, our Dao sect is no longer weak. Should a battle ensue, it's anyone's guess who will emerge victorious, Huan spoke up. Moreover, the alien demons are cunning. Letting Yuan Sect drag this on could lead to unforeseen complications. Lindong nodded slightly. Behind Yuan Sect may lurk the so-called demon prison. These beings clearly have greater schemes in mind. Too cautious to act openly, they corrupt Yuan Sect to advance their plans. If we don't eliminate Yuan Sect soon, peace may be out of reach. Senior Xuanzi, Ling Qingzhu, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke in a soft voice. After the Yuan Sect's losses, they may no longer be the dominant force in the Eastern Mystery region. Oh. Xuanzi turned to Ling Qingzhu, intrigued. The Yuan Sect's campaign affected the entire Eastern Mystery region, destroying many supersections. Though devastated, these sects were not entirely annihilated. Many strong cultivators escaped Yuan Sect's grasp. If the Dao sect launches a counteroffensive with the rallying cry to annihilate Yuan Sect, I believe numerous hidden powerhouses would flock to join. The balance would tip, and the Yuan Sect would find themselves overwhelmed. Ling Qingzhu's clear and cool voice echoed through the hall, sparking a glimmer of hope in the eyes of many present. Lin Dong gave her an appreciative glance. This approach was ruthlessly strategic, striking at the Yuan Sect's core by turning the resentment they had sown against them, drawing in hidden powerhouses to join Dao Sect's cause. Lin Dong, what do you think? A flash of light flickered in EngSubs' eyes, his face betraying a barely concealed excitement. Lin Dong smiled and nodded. Good. EngSubs suddenly stood up, his face filled with agitation. Over the past year, the Dao Sect had nearly been suffocated by the Yuan Sect, but now, could this situation truly begin to reverse? Send the message out, invite all the strong cultivators from the Eastern Mystery region, and together, let's form the Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance. 3 days from now, we shall fight to the death with the Yuan Sect. The news of the Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance quickly spread across the Eastern Mystery region. Initially, there wasn't much reaction, but as the authenticity of the news was confirmed, the region erupted in a frenzy. Countless hidden experts across the Eastern Mystery region surged forth, quickly heading in the direction of the Dao Sect. On their faces, there was one common emotion: hatred for the Yuan Sect. The sky above the Eastern Mystery region seemed to be buzzing with activity over these few days. Countless figures tore through the air, heading toward the Dao Sect. A faint aura of vengeance quietly enveloped the entire region. Yuan Sect. The once majestic sect was no longer as grand as it had been. Black demonic energy swirled within the sect, and a cold, eerie wind blew constantly. The Yuan Sect disciples moving through the area absorbed the demonic energy, their faces twisted in ecstasy and madness. This sect had become a demonic domain. In the deepest part of the Yuan Sect, at the bottom of a deep ravine, 3 figures stood with their hands behind their backs. There was a terrifying aura subtly radiating from them. I've heard that the Dao Sect is forming the Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance and is ready to fight us to the death. One of the figures suddenly chuckled softly. Then let them come. Once we crush this alliance, the Eastern Mystery region will no longer pose any resistance. The Yuan Sect will be the sole ruler here, said the figure in the middle, a man dressed in a white robe. His eyes shimmered with black and white, as though representing the balance of yin and yang. He was Tianyuanzi, one of the Yuan Sect's 3 giants. I've fought with that Lin Dong before. I didn't expect him to grow this powerful in just 3 years. How interesting, said Ren Yuanzi, a silver-haired figure standing next to Tianyuanzi, with a faint smile. 3 years ago, we could crush him with a wave of our hands. 3 years later, it will be the same. The result won't change in the slightest, Tianyuanzi said coldly. Ren Yuanzi nodded and waved his sleeve. A silver beam shot out from his hand, diving into the deep ravine below. This space, Ancestral Talisman, I still can't fully activate it. After all, it's not mine. What a pity. The silver light streaked into the ravine, where in the deepest part, black mist swirled. A shadow, as solid as a rock, sat cross-legged. The silver light flashed and entered the figure's body. Tianyuanzi gazed at the indistinct figure deep within the ravine, a strange expression appearing on his face. He muttered to himself, Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance. Come, Dao Sect. I'll give you a surprise you could never have imagined. In just 3 days, the atmosphere in the Eastern Mystery region had changed dramatically. The once hidden experts, who had been fleeing from the Yuan Sect's pursuit, began to emerge from their hiding places. They made their way to the only other remaining super sect in the region, Dao Sect. The shockwaves caused by the so-called Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance far exceeded the expectations of EngSubs and the others. So when they saw the wave of strong cultivators pouring toward Dao Sect, their expressions froze in disbelief. In the end, they had underestimated the hatred the Yuan Sect had stirred up in the Eastern Mystery region. Outside Dao Sect, the mountains were filled with figures. The roar of voices gathered together and surged into the sky, turning the vast mountain range into a noisy marketplace. In the sky above, light shadows streaked by. Many of them were powerful individuals, but they all shared one thing in common: a burning hatred in their eyes. Their sect had been destroyed, their brothers slain, their lives turned into fugitives. Any one of these reasons was enough for them to swear eternal enmity with the Yuan Sect. Buzz buzz. As more and more powerful cultivators arrived, the Dao Sect's protective formation began to tremble. The protective barrier slowly dissipated, and then, a vast wave of primordial energy spread outward like a rising tide. Whoosh, whoosh. Countless figures surged out from within, finally suspending in the sky. The gathered aura was vast and powerful, and every Dao Sect disciple's face bore an expression of confidence. The powerful figures from other super sects looked at the disciples of Dao Sect, each bearing an aura of strength, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Compared to the Dao Sect, their own disciples truly fell short. It was no wonder Dao Sect managed to remain one of only 2 surviving super sects in the Eastern Mystery region despite repeated invasions from the Yuan Sect. Boom! While they marveled, a surge of murderous intent suddenly exploded into the sky. This intense aura startled countless experts, who quickly looked up to see a massive black cloud shooting forth from Dao Sect, hovering motionless in the air above. Their synchronized breathing created an imposing pressure, as if a colossal, ferocious tiger had formed above them, emanating overwhelming menace. What? The sight of such a fearsome force made the expressions of the gathered experts shift dramatically, a trace of terror flickering in their eyes. They clearly sensed the formidable power of this troop. Is this force part of Dao Sect? Why have we never heard of them before? Word is that they were brought back from outside the region by Lin Dong from Dao Sect, highly formidable. Lin Dong? Could it be the Dao Sect disciple who was forced out of the Eastern Mystery region by the Yuan Sect's 3 giants 3 years ago? Heh, who else could it be? But he's no longer the nobody he was back then. 3 days ago, Yuan Sect's Grand Elder, Lu Feng, led troops to attack the 9 Heavens Taiching Palace, and he rushed to their aid. In the end, not a single one of those old Yuan Sect scoundrels got away. He's that strong? Dao Sect is blessed indeed. First they had Zhou Tong, and now there's Lin Dong. Truly, Dao Sect dares to openly confront Yuan Sect this time precisely because Lin Dong has returned. And he didn't come back alone. He brought with him an exceptionally fearsome group of allies. This time, those 3 old scoundrels from Yuan Sect finally have a match. With the appearance of this fierce troop, whispers erupted across the field as countless eyes filled with surprise and curiosity. Clearly, Lin Dong, a name once celebrated throughout the Eastern Mystery region, was now being revived after a brief lull. Whoosh! Following the tiger-devouring army, other figures appeared, floating in midair. They were EngSubs, Lin Dong, and the Grand Elder Zhu Li. With EngSubs' arrival, the noisy atmosphere gradually quieted down. Everyone, I believe none of us are strangers here. Dao Sect sympathizes deeply with the hardships you've all faced this past year. But until now, Dao Sect has barely been able to defend itself, unable to extend a hand in aid. So I hope there are no hard feelings. EngSubs' gaze swept over them, hands clasped as his deep voice echoed among the mountains. You're too kind, Sect Master Eng. We have only ourselves to blame for our previous short-sightedness. If we had joined forces earlier, things might not have come to this. Not far away, a large group hovered in the air. At the front stood a thin elder in green, a massive sword on his back. An extremely sharp sword aura radiated from him, but his expression was filled with bitterness. Sect Master Mo. EngSubs looked at the green-robed elder with a sigh. Who is that? Lin Dong glanced at the elder, sensing his powerful aura. A true expert at the revolution stage, surrounded by an intense sword aura. Clearly, he was no ordinary figure. That's Imogen, the sect master of the Sword Sect. But the Sword Sect has long since fallen, and this is likely all that remains, Eng Huan softly explained beside him. Many of the former sect leaders and elders from the 8 super sects are here. They managed to escape from Yuan Sect, though they dared not reveal themselves until now. To Lin Dong's left, Ling Qingzhu's clear, melodious voice chimed in as her bright eyes scanned the crowd. Thanks to your plan, if we can unite this strength, our chances of defeating the Yuan Sect will increase greatly, Lin Dong said sincerely. If Dao Sect alone were to face Yuan Sect head-on, even if they achieved victory, it would likely be a costly one. It's only because of your recent victory 3 days ago that they dared to show themselves. Otherwise, they might have chosen to leave the Eastern Mystery region altogether, rather than oppose Yuan Sect, Ling Qingzhu said with a slight shake of her head. If we're going to use these people to form a Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance, we'll need to keep them in line. Otherwise, they could do more harm than good, Ing Huanhuan said coolly. Miss Huanhuan is right. Lin Dong nodded slightly, then exchanged a glance with Ing Xuanzi before stepping forward. As he emerged, countless gazes quickly turned toward him, and a faint stir rippled through the crowd. Clearly, they had recognized him. Friends from the Eastern Mystery region, I'm sure you all know why you've been invited here today. The Yuan Sect has initiated a war, one that has affected the entire Eastern Mystery region. Numerous super sects have been destroyed, their sects obliterated, their people dead. I believe your feelings toward the Yuan Sect are similar to the enmity we hold in the Dao Sect. Lin Dong's eyes swept across the room, a sharp glint flashing in them. His imposing aura was so overwhelming that even Emojian, the Sword Sect's sect master, felt a chill run down his spine. Lin Dong's voice echoed powerfully through the air. However, you all are also aware of the Yuan Sect's strength. To deal with this threat, there is only one way forward, and that is to unite all our forces as one. Our Dao Sect has an irreconcilable feud with the Yuan Sect. Today, our sect is emptying its ranks to declare a death match against them. If you stand with us, the Dao Sect will treat you as brothers and allies. But if anyone attempts to sabotage us or undermine our resolve to destroy the Yuan Sect, then I, Lin Dong, will treat them as one of the Yuan Sect's own and deal with them accordingly. Boom! With a resounding roar, Lin Dong's eyes suddenly flashed with a ruthless light. An overwhelming purple-golden glow erupted, swirling like a torrent of energy. Thousands of purple-golden dragon patterns spiraled together, coalescing into a massive dragon claw several thousand feet in size. With a swift slash, the earth split apart, a deep rift stretching for 10,000 feet, cleaving the mountain in two. The force was so terrifying that it shook the heavens and the earth. The deafening roar reverberated through the land, and the surrounding warriors, who had been watching, were struck by fear. They looked at Lin Dong, who now resembled a god of death, with expressions filled with shock, beads of cold sweat appearing on their foreheads. Unlike Ing Xuanzi's calm demeanor, this young man before them seemed far more ruthless and decisive. Roar! A deafening roar followed, as the tiger-devouring army let out a furious howl. The monstrous killing intent darkened the sky, further accentuating Lin Dong's murderous aura. The entire sky grew silent, and even the super-strong sect masters and elders from former super sects trembled in fear, not daring to provoke him. Ling Qingzhu looked up at Lin Dong, who had just single-handedly intimidated countless powerful warriors of the Eastern Mystery region. A faint smile curled at the corner of her lips. Who would have thought that the once young and fragile boy had grown to this extent? At this moment, he might well be considered the true number one in the Eastern Mystery region. Brother Lin Dong is right. We share the same enemy with the Yuan Sect. We will never resort to sabotage. If anyone tries such a thing, I believe none of us here will let them off, said Emo, the Sword Sect's sect master, his nervousness slowly fading as he spoke, cupping his hands in salute. Master Emo is right. As long as we can destroy the Yuan Sect, Brother Lin Dong, you can command anything. The Great Desolation Sect will follow without question. A tall, gaunt old man, the sect master of the Great Desolation Sect and one of the most formidable figures in the Eastern Mystery region, added his voice from nearby. With their leadership, the crowd roared in agreement. Many voices rang out, filled with excitement, as the shared hatred for the Yuan Sect united them all. Ing Xuanzi looked at the vast sea of people, now far more immense and charged than before, and he quietly exhaled, a look of satisfaction crossing his face as he turned to Lin Dong. Thank you, sect masters, Lin Dong said, cupping his hands to Emo and the others. The overwhelming killing intent surrounding him slowly receded. Since we are all united in purpose, the Yuan Sect Annihilation Alliance is now established. Afterward, you may leave or stay as you wish. And now, Lin Dong paused, his gaze scanning the vast sea of people. The eyes of everyone were filled with hatred for the Yuan Sect. Lin Dong's hand slowly lifted, and in that instant, a chilling, murderous aura surged in his eyes. Let's move out. Today, we will annihilate the Yuan Sect. Roar. A thunderous roar shook the heavens. The mountain trembled as Yuan energy surged. Countless figures shot forward, charging like a raging flood across the sky. The final battle with the Yuan Sect had arrived. Hundreds of miles away, within the Yuan Sect's territory, on a mountain peak, more than 100 Yuan Sect disciples were gathered. This was a lookout post for the Yuan Sect, specifically set up to monitor movements around their sect. In the past, such a post would not have been necessary, as it was always the Yuan Sect attacking others. There had never been a need for them to defend against any threat. The current situation in the Eastern Mystery region had undergone a dramatic shift in just 3 short days. This change was so significant that even the dynasties allied with the Yuan Sect could sense it. As a result, some shrewd dynasties quickly pulled back their forces and fortified their own territories, no longer daring to rashly attack others. They understood that if the Yuan Sect were to fall, although it might not be able to wipe out every dynasty under its influence, those who had acted the most aggressively would surely face retribution. Thus, with the situation still unclear, it was best to exercise caution. On the mountain peak, the scouts' sharp gazes continuously swept across their surroundings. From time to time, someone would dash out to scout other areas. What is that? As time passed, someone suddenly exclaimed. The people nearby looked up and saw that in the distant sky, the light had suddenly become much brighter. Within that torrent of light, countless silhouettes seemed to emerge. Something's wrong. Send a signal. The scouts' expressions changed drastically, fear flickering in their eyes. Shouts erupted from their mouths. Whoosh! A fiery red flare shot out from their hands, blossoming in the sky. It was clearly visible even from 100 miles away. Just as the signal was sent, a wave of light surged from the horizon. Only then did the scouts see the overwhelming mass of figures within that light. These figures stared at them with vicious gazes, filled with deep-seated hatred. Swish, swish. Without a word, a torrent of attacks whistled down from the sky. The entire mountain peak was flattened under the ferocious assault. After leveling the mountain, the flood of silhouettes in the sky did not pause, heading straight for the Yuan Sect stronghold. As the signal spread through the sky, brilliant flares rose in multiple directions, only to be quickly swallowed up by the oncoming waves of light and shadow. The flames of vengeance surged from all directions, completely encircling the Yuan Sect. Inside the Yuan Sect, demonic aura swirled, as if ghostly wails were echoing from within. Chaos had erupted inside the sect, with countless figures darting around. When they looked up, they saw a seemingly endless sea of glowing figures sweeping toward them from the distance. The sheer number was beyond comprehension. Even though the disciples of the Yuan Sect were cloaked in demonic energy, fear flashed across their faces at the sight of such a formidable force. Attack! Outside the Yuan Sect's gates, a multitude of figures appeared. As soon as they laid eyes on the Yuan Sect members, their eyes turned blood red. With a roar, tens of thousands of silhouettes charged toward the Yuan Sect. Courting death. Just as they were about to storm the Yuan Sect, a cold voice echoed. Suddenly, a massive black ribbon, stretching 1,000 feet, shot out from within the sect. As it swept across, anyone it touched was instantly corroded into skeletal remains, falling from the sky without so much as a scream. Seeing such a ruthless counterattack, the bloodthirsty frenzy in the attacker's eyes was momentarily shocked into retreat. Regaining their composure, they hastily fell back, their gazes toward the Yuan Sect filled with fear. With the reckless vanguard now serving as a grim example, the mass of figures in the sky grew cautious, not daring to charge recklessly again. They hovered in the air, glaring at the heavily fortified Yuan Sect with eyes brimming with hatred. At that moment, a commotion rippled through the airborne crowd as a massive rift opened. The formidable forces of the Dao sect surged in, led by Lin Dong and EngSubs. Their arrival bolstered the morale of the surrounding fighters, adding a fresh surge of anger in their eyes as they looked toward the Yuan Sect. Lin Dong, standing on the void, gazed at the demonic aura-infused Yuan Sect and couldn't help but shake his head. He had never imagined that what was once the most powerful sect in the Eastern Mystery region would now become a place steeped in such demonic influence. Yuan Sect's 3 dogs, even at this point, you still cower? Lin Dong's cold gaze penetrated deep into the Yuan Sect. His voice, amplified by powerful primordial energy, boomed like thunder across the sky. How dare you storm our Yuan Sect? You are courting death. A Yuan Sect elder roared furiously from above the sect's gates. Is this your place to speak? Lu Qing's eyes widened as he opened his mouth. Instantly, a dragon roar burst forth, carrying overwhelming dragon might. However, just as the dragon's roar surged into the Yuan Sect's grounds, a streak of black light suddenly shot forth from the depths of the sect, forcibly shattering the dragon's sonic wave. Heh, you've got some nerve, even managing to bring a dragon powerhouse into the Eastern Mystery region. As the wave dissipated, 3 streaks of black light emerged from the depths and swiftly appeared in the sky. 3 figures stood there. The one on the right had skin as delicate as a newborn and silver hair, while the figure on the left was clad in a black robe, with skin as white as jade, and one particularly pale hand. Between them stood a man in a white robe, his eyes a blend of black and white, swirling with the yin-yang essence that seemed to draw anyone into their depths. Such a demeanor, such an aura, unchanged from 3 years prior. Who else could it be but the Yuan Sect's 3 giants? Lin Dong's gaze locked onto the trio, his eyes seething with a murderous intent that had been brewing for years. Ever since he had been forced out of the Eastern Mystery region 3 years ago, this day had never been far from his thoughts. He had endured countless brushes with death, all for this moment. Exhaling deeply, Lin Dong's aura began to change. If he had been a sheathed sword before, now that sword was drawn, its sharpness piercing through the clouds. Little Mink and Little Yin clenched their hands tightly, their eyes flashing with fierce intent. Within the Yuan Sect, Tian Yuanzi and his companions sensed Lin Dong's shifting aura, their expressions growing tense. Whether they admitted it or not, it was clear. This was no longer the same minor Dao sect disciple they had driven out 3 years ago. We should have killed you at any cost back then, Tian Yuanzi sighed. Did you really hold back? Lin Dong chuckled, his tone laced with mockery. Back then, the Yuan Sect's 3 giants had joined forces just to deal with him, a mere Dao sect disciple. Had it not been for Qing Ji's intervention, his escape might have been impossible. Tian Yuanzi's eyes narrowed, a cold glint flashing as he said calmly, "There's no need for gloating. We let you escape then. This time, you'll be dealt with. Perhaps it's your turn to suffer misfortune this time. You old dogs," Lin Dong replied softly. "Arrogant brat. Do you think you're the only one who has grown stronger over these 3 years? Let me show you the vast gap that still remains between us." Ren Yuanzi's face darkened, and with a flicker, he appeared before Lin Dong, reaching out with a hand that radiated intense reincarnation energy. Reincarnation stage? Nearby elders like Elder Zhuli were momentarily stunned by this revelation, preparing to act before Lin Dong waved them back. A flash of black light shot from his sleeve, transforming into a shadowy figure wielding a black blade, which unhesitatingly slashed toward the approaching Ren Yuanzi. Xing. The black blade moved without fanfare, but Ren Yuanzi's pupil shrank, overwhelmed by a sense of mortal danger. Slick. In the blink of an eye, the blade cleaved through his hand, severing the profound reincarnation energy and cutting deeply into his flesh, spraying blood. Ah! Ren Yuanzi shrieked, retreating swiftly back into the Yuan Sect as space distorted around him. He stared at the shadow beside Lin Dong with a mix of fear and rage. "Be careful, that thing is unusual," Tian Yuanzi warned, eyes fixed on the shadow. Ren Yuanzi gritted his teeth, face pale. Who would have expected Lin Dong to deliver such a powerful opening strike? "This boy has come prepared," the icy voice of Di Yuanzi broke the tense silence. "Prepared, is he?" Tian Yuanzi smiled coldly. "Then it's only fitting we return the favor." With a wave of his sleeve, the space around him distorted rapidly. Black mist billowed as a hazy figure emerged from the twisting void. Lin Dong and his allies immediately noticed the anomaly, their brows furrowing at the unsettling energy radiating from the void. "Russell," I said, "since so many from the Dao sect have come here, you should meet an old friend." Tian Yuanzi's face grew increasingly strange as he smiled at the figure. A pale hand extended from his sleeve, and under the watchful gazes of countless eyes, he slowly pulled back his black cloak. As the cloak fell, a handsome yet deathly pale young face appeared before everyone. "Who is this?" Lin Dong stared at the unfamiliar person, pausing for a moment. Strangely, despite being a complete stranger, the figure gave him a strangely familiar feeling. A sudden commotion erupted from behind Lin Dong. He turned his head to seeing Xuanzi's face go ashen. His trembling finger pointed at the figure, his eyes filled with disbelief. You, Zhou Tong, you're still alive. How is that possible?" "Zhou Tong?" Lin Dong's heart skipped a beat, his gaze fixed on the figure in shock. This person? Could it really be the most outstanding disciple of Dao sect a century ago, the one who even comprehended the great wilderness scripture? Zhou Tong? But